Thank you. Thank you. It's wonderful to be here. Today I'm going to talk about my new book, Think Bigger, which just came out a week ago. And I'm going to walk you through the journey as to how I got to this book and what's in it. So I was born in 1969, the same year that Neil and Buzz landed on the moon. And in the early 70s, people would always talk about the pictures of the Earth as seen from the moon, the blue marble. And it's often been described to me as being a brilliant, nearly impossible blue. When I was little, I would often be seen walking on the streets of Queens, where I was growing up, with my head looking up. I was fascinated by that light, gauzy blue sky, and I would imagine myself being up there, flying around, exploring. I wanted to be in space too. And that was my dream. I had to put that dream away. That dream was taken off the table because as I was growing up, I was going blind. And in fact, what I was instead confronted by was not the dream of going up to the moon, but lots and lots of questions. I was continually confronted by questions that amounted to what kind of choices would I have? Could she learn to read and write? Could she learn to do math and science? How is she going to get around? Could she have friends? Could she get married? Could she have kids? How is she going to survive? The questions were endless, and I kept wondering, what choices do I have? The interesting thing is that we give people contrasting messages about choice. On the one hand, we tell people to dream big, imagine the impossible, and yet at the same time, when it's time to get real and we see something that's a challenge or unexpectedly not good, we tell people to become realistic and settle for what is or what the options are that are put before you. And so it feels as if we have to settle for the meager options. So my question became, at first intuitively, and then later, I suppose, I started to make it more precise, is how do we get the most from choice? I wanted choice. I wanted to make choices. I wanted to create choices. How do we get the most from choice? And I would say that is my passion, as in that's the question that I've been trying to answer pretty much my entire personal and professional life. My first book, The Art of Choosing, which came out in 2010, answered the question by considering the fact that, this thing we call tool, this tool we call choice, the way you get the most from it is by understanding its limitations. And it's only as you understand its limitations that you can potentially optimize. So, for example, if I simply give you many, 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 many options, that does not empower you, particularly if most of those new options are meaningless or fake or trivial or just noise. If anything, it might paralyze you rather than empower you. And so, in that book, I talked about how, in order to get the most from choice, you really had to understand what you wanted, and you had to search in a very strategic way, not bombarding yourself with a lot of choice, but in a strategic way to find the best fit. Now that assumes that the power of choice solely comes from your extraterrestrial powers and the ability to pick and find. But I don't think that's the whole story. I think that's only part of the story. I think the real story of choice and the power of choice is that it doesn't just come from our ability to pick and find. It actually comes from our ability to create meaningful choices. And that's what Think Bigger is all about. It's how do you create meaningful choices? We all hear and know the imperative, think out of the box. And yet, has anyone ever told you how to do it? Like, really told you how to do it? I mean, we think of it as like magic, like an apple is supposed to fall on your head and suddenly you have a revelation. Or we think of this magic appearing to special people, perhaps in a special place or in a special time, doing a special thing. sort of what happens to us on a random basis when we're in the shower or taking a nap or we're on a jog. And if that magic doesn't appear in one of those randomly occurring activities that we engage in on a regular basis, then we resort to brainstorming because we need an idea. We need to create a solution to whatever problem we have. We just got to get to it. But what if I were to tell you that it isn't out of your control? What if I were to tell you that actually we should be able to innovate now on the process of innovation itself? I mean, let's face it, brainstorming was invented in 1938. Despite all the discussions around how we need more innovation, we have not innovated on the actual process of innovation since 1938. We all go back to either magic or brainstorming. Now, what if I were to tell you that that black box of what we call magic can actually be opened? We actually know how it works, and it's been staring at us now for a long time. So the Think Bigger method, even though I've put a name to it, is actually simply providing an application of what we've learned in the last 20 to 30 years from advances in neuro and cognitive science. I'm essentially stealing knowledge that we got from neuroscience about how learning and memory works and how we form thoughts. And then I'm combining that with our knowledge that we have from cognitive science, which tells us about all the ways in which if we don't manage and process information in a strategic way, we can actually become bias-making machines. And so putting that knowledge together, I've created a 6-step method and a tool by which we can think bigger. And when I say think bigger, I mean creating choices that go beyond the set of options presented before you. I literally mean thinking about creating new choices. So, to tell you about this, I'm going to start by giving you the definition of innovation. So the great Schumpeter, the economist, he gave us the theory, right? That what is innovation? It's a new combination of existing ideas or old ideas. His contemporary, the French polymath Henri Poincaré, defined innovation in a more precise, mechanical way, where he said, invention consists of avoiding the constructing of useless combinations and consists of the constructing of useful combinations, which are an infinite minority. To invent is to discern, to choose. So allow me now to propose a corollary to you, which is to choose is to invent. That you can use choice to construct those most useful combinations. It's a tool for creating useful, novel combinations to solve complex problems. That's what I've been teaching students to do since 2014. So in 2012, I started to tinker around and ask myself, wait, we can do better than what we have right now. And I began to create this method. So it's a 6-step method, and I'm going to pass around a card, since I can't use slides today. So I'm going to pass around a card to you, and on the front, it shows you the 6 steps, and some of those steps might sound very familiar, and some of those steps might sound mysterious. And on the back, and by the way, walk people through the entire method and how the tools work in the book. But on the back, it shows you a snapshot of the tool. So the 6 steps are choose a problem, break that problem down into its most important parts, compare wants, meaning actually think about your feelings. Don't ignore those because that's your selection criteria. Search in and out of the box, choice map, and the third eye test. Now on the back, if you turn it over, it shows you what a choice map is. And I'm going to do it really quickly in the interest of time. Define the problem at the top. Along the side are your most important sub-problems. So this one has just got 3. You can have 3 to 6, no more. And then across every row, you have your options. You have best practices within the industry, and you look far and wide for how others have solved the analogous problem in other industries. And then, just like Henri Poincaré advised, you combine across the rows to create so many possible solutions. So that's the method in the nutshell, and I've been teaching this to students since 2014, MBAs and engineering students, and then along the way, different industry leaders have been starting to follow this method, and just recently I wrote it up as a book, and it just came out, and my hope is to empower everybody, no matter where they come from, to think bigger. So thank you very much.
So I certainly need methods for thinking bigger than thinking too small, far too long. So we do have a couple of questions for you. One of them comes in with, can you share examples of companies or individuals that have actually used the Think Bigger method? What happened and what did they find?
So we have, I would say, in the interest of time, I'll talk about maybe one example that's something that's in line with some of the themes talked about today. So as I mentioned earlier, we have a number of industry leaders that have been coming to mentor the students, and they too have begun to learn the method. And one of them is a woman by the name of Deborah Dugan, who learned the method, and so she invited me to help her during the pandemic. And during the pandemic, the Bill and Melinda Gates Council created what was called the Wisdom Councils, where they brought together folks from not-for-profits along with industry sort of for-profit corporate leaders to try to solve some of the problems that we were dealing with during the height of the pandemic. And so, for example, remember the ventilator problem? Well, there were folks at Caltech who within 37 days created a portable ventilator that anybody could use. And when I say anybody, you don't even have to be a physician. It was that easy to use, and the instructions were relatable to no matter what language you spoke, because it was all pictures. And that's how you could get ventilators to the remote parts of Africa. That's just one example, but it was used for a lot of different nasty problems that happened during COVID.
We could certainly need more solutions to that, continuing. So one second question is, what do you see as the biggest challenges individuals and organizations face when trying to innovate? How can organizations balance the need for structure and process with the need for creativity and experimentation?
So I really believe that the reason why people get petrified of change is because they're afraid they themselves are going to be left behind, or it's going to become undoable in some way for them. And I think that if you actually show them that this is a method, innovation is not something that is a differentiator. In fact, you can make it accessible to everyone. And I think that if more people were trained and you created an environment where everybody was doing it, I do think some of those barriers would start to reduce.
Well, thank you so much. Again, let's give us a hand.
Thank you.
For Sheena.